Clearly, we must destroy the Islamic State. The government's plan is to send planes to bomb it in Iraq with advisors helping Iraqi soldiers on the ground. Sounds simple if Iraq's army does now fight. But two-thirds of the Islamic State is actually in Syria, fighting President Bashar Assad's regime and rival rebel forces. Assad is backed by Russia and Iran. Our Arab allies hate him, and so we don't dare go in there. Instead, there, the US will arm 5,000 rebels of the so-called moderate Free Syrian Army and hope they'll fight the Islamic State. Trouble is, former US presidential candidate John McCain thinks they'll fight Assad instead.
You don't think that the Free Syrian Army is going to fight against Bashar Assad, who has been decimating them? That's a fundamental fallacy.
And if Assad's forces then hit back at our Syrian rebels, we could be dragged into a wider war.
Any attack on those that we have trained who are supporting us, we will help them.
A decade ago, Allied forces in Iraq recaptured Mosul, today under the Islamic State's control. The chief of Allied operations then was the now retired Major General Jim Molan, who joins me. Thanks for your time, Jim.
Andrew, good morning.
Can we destroy the Islamic State without boots on the ground?
I think we can be very, very successful in what we do up there, Andrew, and it's very important the language that we use, and I see the Prime Minister is using disrupt and degrade at this stage of the game. I've always defined defeat and destroy as, in a military sense, as being the prevention of a force from achieving its aim. So in that sense, you can defeat or destroy ISIL. There are no guarantees in what everyone is trying to do, what the West is trying to do, and I think that's what Senator McCain was getting at. But I have great confidence that the probabilities are increasing that we can be successful in northern Iraq.
Well, you've worked with the Iraqi military. Can we rely on Iraq's soldiers to fight? Their record so far has been atrocious.
I believe that the Iraqi army will fight. It will only fight if it's got a good leadership that it can trust, and it will only fight for Iraq if Iraq deserves its soldiers to fight for it. What we saw in Mosul was an incredible collapse of the armed forces. I've had my mind on other things for some time. It certainly surprised me. We can sit around and allocate blame for that as long as you like, but I heard a most magnificent story, an interview of an Iraqi soldier who had just withdrawn from Mosul, and he said, "We only ran away because our officers ran away. When I fought with the American officers fought side by side. If our officers had fought side by side with us, we'd still be in Mosul." And this is what it comes down to, Andrew. It comes down to adequate leadership at the political level in the first instance, and then at the tactical level. Where the value of the West's air power comes in is that it gives these people confidence that the terror that's being created by ISIL is not going to be applied to them without them having a fair chance.
Well, you're confident then in northern Iraq. Talking about Syria now, should we or can we rely on 5,000 Syrian rebels to fight the Islamic State for us?
There's an awful lot of unknowns, but the way that I think about this myself is that an organisation like ISIL has the seeds of its own destruction within it. And I saw that basically in Fallujah, when the people of Fallujah rejected al-Qaeda in those days. We're seeing a bit of it now in Mosul, with certain indications that the people in Mosul are rejecting the kind of terror that's being applied to them. The seed of their own destruction really is their intolerance. They rely on intimidation and they rely on fear to enable them to achieve what they're doing. The troops on the ground and aeroplanes in the air and everything else that's going around the building of coalitions around the world puts pressure on ISIL so that these internal contradictions will start to operate on them. So I am very comfortable with the fact that we are going to do certain things in northern Iraq. we have made general commitments, and the Prime Minister is certainly of the view that we aren't going into... Australian forces won't be used in Syria, but American forces may be. And if we can achieve what I think is more than feasible within northern Iraq, then we should look for... The West, this coalition, should look for opportunities as to what is happening in Syria. But you don't have to do detailed planning on that at this stage, because no one knows what's going to happen. You just need to be prepared to react to opportunities.
So we could go into Syria ultimately, but Jim, a year ago you helped design and implement Operation Sovereign Borders for the Abbott government. You've been working for them all this time. Now that's been a huge success. What was the critical difference there in finally stopping the boats?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of discussion now, and it's very, very interesting, about some kind of super ministry. And people are saying that across a number of functions in Australia that have to do with not just customs and immigration, but policing, intelligence, etc., that there should be a form of Operation Sovereign Borders of the Joint Agency Task Force that can be applied to this. And I think we're mixing up two things at the moment that is very, very interesting. The first is we're mixing up personalities. People are saying this person should do it or that person should do it. And we're mixing up personalities with organisation. We've got to start on this, Andrew, which I think is the point of your question. We've got to understand why we were successful with Operation Sovereign Borders. We were successful for the simple reason that there was an incredible alignment between the Prime Minister, a single minister responsible for Operation Sovereign Borders, and an extraordinarily competent operator at the doing level, that is Angus Campbell. Now, of those three people, they all played their roles, but the one that I consider to be the most important position in that alignment is a single minister with a single minister who is accountable, who has the resources to apply to this, and who has the authorities. I've seen discussions, Andrew, where people are saying Director General of ASIO should be the kind of internal security czar in Australia. And I would be so strongly against that, because you'll find that a man that's got a 7-day-a-week job, you don't want to dump a whole bunch of other things on top of him, and you don't want him as an official answering to 3 or 5 ministers. That would be a disaster.
So what are you saying, Jim, that there should be, like with Scott Morrison has had all, you know, customs and immigration and all these things under his control, when it comes to Homeland Security, ASIO, Federal Police, Immigration, one portfolio?
Well, I think it should look something like that. I have no inside information on that. The point that I make is that you can't do this by committee. You can't have 3 or 4 or 5 ministers responsible for parts of this. If you're going to learn the lessons of success in Operation Sovereign Borders and Joint Agency Task Force, the key thing is a minister who is accountable, has authority and has the resources. Don't spread it across 3 or 4 or 5 ministers. Good
job for Scott Morrison. Now, Jim, this week you resigned from working with the Defence Minister. You only just started going on his staff after Operation Sovereign Borders. Why did you quit?
Well, I've had an incredible couple of years, Andrew. I had a long period of time where we co-authored Operation Sovereign Borders. I then launched it with the Prime Minister and with Scott Morrison. I then argued it through the campaign, spent 10 months travelling almost continuously through every transit country. Some I've visited 4 times. And after that, I accepted a request from the Defence Minister to act as his advisor on the White Paper. It took me 3 weeks, unfortunately, to realise that this was not feasible. Now, I don't want to talk about this in any detail at all, but I would like to say that it's certainly the reason for this being not feasible had nothing to do with the professionalism of the Department of Defence, of the ADF, of the Chief of the Defence Force or the Secretary of the Department. But apart from that, I just decided that the job was not feasible and I could be more effective doing what I'm doing now, talking openly about things.
Well, it seems to me that you're narrowing your criticism down to the Minister, David Johnston.
Well, that's a conclusion you can come to, and that's something that I would discuss in private with others.
Jim Molan, thank you very much for your time.
In fact, Andrew, I'd say that was probably an on-water activity.
Jim Molan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, how long before Labor breaks with the government on fighting terrorism? The panel is next.